So Donald Trump is scheduled to take the stand today in his $250 million New York City civil fraud trial. The former president will have to defend his actions as head of the Trump Organization and deny allegations he ordered his subordinates to falsify financial records and inflate his wealth. The New York Times reports Trump is deeply, personally enraged by this trial and by the fact that his children have had to testify. Several people who have spoken with him
in their 40s
said,
and 50s, I think.
And he may not be able to restrain himself on the stand.
We can't restrain himself
held
anywhere.
Practice sessions over the weekend to prepare for today's testimony because he's so upset.
He's so angry.
Joining us now.
Well, he's been caught doing something that people have been knowing he's been doing for 40 years.
From outside the courthouse, former litigator and MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin. Lisa, what can we expect today?
I think, Mika, you're exactly right that part of what we're really looking for today is seeing whether former President Trump either deliberately or not deliberately loses his temper as he's being examined about the core issue in this trial, which is whether he, his adult sons, Allen Weisselberg, Jeff McConney, and others at the Trump Organization intended to defraud the lenders and insurance companies with whom they were dealing and to whom they sent his statements of financial condition, which are sort of like a 360 picture of his financial status. Trump will disclaim again and again, as Michael Cohen warned us, that he had any involvement in that. And to the extent that there are valuation discrepancies, that's someone else's problem and something that the accountants should have checked. What I'm really watching for today is whether Trump does slip up and give indications. And of course, he was the one who either directed this or signaled that he wanted this to happen. Why? Because having the world think that he was a multi-billionaire was more important to him than telling the truth, particularly when he was dealing with the people that he needed money from the most.
Lisa, Al Sharpton, one of the things that I'll be looking for, and I want you to address this, as someone that knew Trump when he tried to play more liberal and Democrat, is that he always bragged about how he was self-made, how he took nothing and made himself something, even though it wasn't true. His father had given him hundreds of millions of dollars. How does he get on the stand today and contrast his self-made, I was this savvy, brilliant, self-made billionaire, with now saying, I really didn't know a lot what was going on. The accountants did it, and I was, 6 feet away from it. And second part of the question, does the prosecutor go at whether you being the self-made brilliant guy is the true Trump, or whether you just happen to be the CEO of a firm that kind of took a life of its own and you had nothing to do with the details, even though you knew every check written in the company? Which side of that does the prosecutors do?
Well, I think Trump is going to try to bridge that distance, Rev. He's going to say, I was immersed in my real estate business, right? I was self-made to the extent that I was focused on building this empire and the assets. What I wasn't focused on was the nitty-gritty of the financial reporting. I left that to Weisselberg and the accountants at all times. And of course, Allen Weisselberg himself, when he was on the stand, he had every incentive to pitch a narrative that's much more in line with Trump's than what the Attorney General wants to get out of him. One of the ways that I think that they'll exploit that Trump knew what was going on is by showing him a series of documents and other people's testimony that is designed to remind him of meetings and other interactions that he had where he boasted about the value of his assets, which insinuates that he was in fact deeply involved in the creation of those values. That includes meetings that he took with people from Forbes or meetings that he took with insurance underwriters where he would make a guest appearance, so to speak, and the last 15 minutes just to brag about the size and scope of his empire.
All right, former litigator and MSNBC legal analyst will be watching today. Lisa Rubin, thank you very much.